Imagine this: you've been giving your all to something or someone, pouring every ounce of yourself into keeping it alive, and yet it's still slipping away. You tell yourself, if I just try harder, maybe it'll work. But what if the real power isn't in holding on? It's in letting go, because sometimes the most life-changing moment isn't when you fight to keep something, it's when you finally decide you deserve peace more than pain. We are conditioned to believe that holding on is what strong people do, that if we just try harder, love deeper, or wait longer, things will eventually fall into place. But there's a truth we often ignore sometimes: strength is not in the grip, but in the release. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you recognized something no longer serves your growth. It means you chose yourself even when it hurt. It means you stopped confusing pain with purpose. The hardest part about letting go isn't losing what's gone, it's confronting the fear that comes after. That empty space, that quiet uncertainty, that feeling of standing alone with no guarantee of what's next. But that's exactly where your power begins to return, in the space where you finally stop chasing what was never meant to stay. When you hold on to something that's already slipping away, you drain your own energy trying to resuscitate what's already expired. It might be a relationship, a dream, or an identity you once clung to. You tell yourself that with just a little more effort, it'll come back to life, but all that effort doesn't revive it. It only exhausts you. The truth is, holding on is often just fear wearing the mask of loyalty. You're not staying because it's right. You're staying because you're scared to see who you are without it. Fear convinces you that without what you're holding onto, you'll collapse. But you won't. You'll only collapse if you never give yourself the chance to stand on your own. Letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you stop letting fear write it for you. Most people think that letting go is an event, a single decision you make one day and never look back. But it's not that simple. Letting go is a process. It's waking up every morning and choosing peace over chaos, self-worth over attachment, and acceptance over resistance. It's the small, daily decisions that reinforce your power: deleting the number, saying no to that familiar temptation, refusing to revisit the memory that keeps you small. It's realizing that you don't need closure from them to move on. You can give closure to yourself. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from clarity. The clarity that tells you what's gone isn't a loss, it's a clearing, a space for something new to grow. A reminder that sometimes your future needs the room your past is still occupying. Letting go doesn't make you heartless, it makes you honest. Honest enough to admit that some things are not worth the fight anymore. Honest enough to say that love without respect, effort, or reciprocity is not love, it's attachment. Honest enough to realize that your energy is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. The world often praises endurance: how long you can stay, how much you can take, how far you can stretch yourself for others. But there's a deeper kind of endurance, the courage to walk away when staying costs you your peace. You don't lose when you let go. You lose when you keep betraying yourself in the name of loyalty. The bravest people aren't the ones who cling the hardest. They're the ones who know when enough is enough. There's a kind of liberation that only comes after you stop forcing what's not meant for you. You stop overanalyzing, stop chasing explanations, stop replaying old memories like proof that things could have been different. You start breathing again, maybe not deeply at first, but enough to remember what it feels like to exist without tension. The silence that once scared you starts to feel peaceful. You start noticing the small things you'd forgotten to appreciate: a calm morning, a clear mind, your own company. That's the moment you realize you never needed to hold on to feel complete. The thing you were clinging to was never your source of strength. It was your distraction from realizing that the strength was always within you. Letting go teaches you something that holding on never can: the art of self-trust. When you release what's comfortable but no longer right, you tell yourself, I trust me to survive this. That's a profound act of faith, because it means you're no longer relying on outcomes, people, or situations to validate your worth. You start to understand that you can lose things and still remain whole. You can end chapters and still be worthy of love and success. That's where real confidence is born, not from getting everything you want, but from knowing you'll be okay even when you don't. Self-trust makes the process of letting go less like falling apart and more like coming home to yourself. When you stop gripping so tightly, you begin to see that life isn't punishing you, it's redirecting you. Every closed door, every faded connection, every ending that broke your heart was simply an invitation to evolve. The universe removes what no longer fits so that you can grow into who you're meant to become. But when you resist that process, you delay your own transformation. You keep repeating old lessons, attracting similar pain, replaying familiar heartbreaks. The moment you surrender not out of defeat, but out of wisdom, everything changes. You begin to trust that what's meant for you will never require you to shrink yourself to keep it. There's a strength in surrender that's misunderstood. People equate surrender with giving up, but it's not that. Surrender means you stop fighting reality. You stop trying to force outcomes. You accept that some things aren't supposed to work, no matter how much you wish they would, and that acceptance is where peace lives. It's where you finally find room to breathe, to think, to rebuild. When you let go, you give life permission to surprise you again. You open doors that can only appear when your hands are free, not clenched around something broken. You realize that freedom was never found in getting what you want, it's found in learning to live without what you thought you couldn't. Sometimes the reason we struggle to let go is because we're addicted to the story, not the reality. The story of who we were when things were good. The story of what it could have been if things had gone differently. But stories can trap you. They make you romanticize what hurt you and keep you tied to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You have to be willing to rewrite your narrative not as a victim who lost something, but as a creator who chose to grow. The ending of one story isn't the end of your worth. It's the beginning of a new chapter, written by someone wiser, stronger, and more self-aware. In the end, letting go is not about losing anything. It's about remembering everything you still have. Your dignity, your peace, your capacity to love yourself after everything tried to make you forget how. It's about reclaiming your time, your energy, and your focus. It's realizing that sometimes what feels like the end is really the turning point that saves you. Because the truth is, the moment you stop trying to control what's leaving, you start regaining control over what stays you. And that's where the power really begins, not in what you can hold on to, but in what you can finally release. One of the hardest things about letting go is realizing that you've tied your identity to what you're releasing. We build entire versions of ourselves around people, goals, jobs, or dreams. And when those things fade or end, we don't just lose them, we lose the version of ourselves that existed with them. It feels like starting over, like being stripped down to nothing, and that emptiness can be terrifying. But what we often forget is that identity isn't fixed. It's fluid. You're not supposed to stay the same. The person you were needed that chapter to grow, but the person you're becoming needs it to end. Every time you let go, it's not destruction, it's evolution. You are not defined by what you lost. You are revealed by how you rise after losing it. There's a false belief that to know who you are, you must cling to what's familiar. We attach ourselves to labels, to roles, to the validation others give us. You think you are the good friend, the loyal partner, the successful one, and when those things are gone, you feel directionless. But those roles were never your essence, they were your expressions. They were ways you showed up in certain seasons of life. Who you are exists beneath those layers, unchanged by external shifts. You are the awareness behind the experiences, not the experiences themselves. The moment you start detaching your worth from titles and outcomes, you realize that identity isn't something you find in others. It's something you uncover within. It's easy to mistake loss for failure, but sometimes losing something is your soul's way of creating space for authenticity. The universe has a way of removing what no longer matches your frequency, even when you're not ready to release it. That's why the end of certain relationships or dreams hurts so deeply, not because they were wrong, but because they've served their purpose. They helped you learn, love, and evolve into someone new. But growth demands honesty, and honesty often means admitting that what once fit no longer does. It's not betrayal, it's truth. The version of you that clings to comfort can't coexist with the version of you that's destined for alignment. One must end for the other to begin. When you build your identity around external things, you give away your power. You start depending on situations and people to feel valuable. You believe that without them, you are less. But true identity is built on inner stability, the kind that doesn't crumble when life changes. It's built on self-awareness, integrity, and resilience. When you know who you are beyond what you have, you stop chasing constant reassurance. You no longer need to prove your worth. You start living it. That's when letting go becomes less about loss and more about returning to your center. Because no matter what life takes from you, it can't take your essence unless you hand it over willingly. Most people never realize how much of their identity is built on survival. We adapt to environments, expectations, and people in ways that make us feel accepted. But survival identity is not authentic identity. It's who you became to be safe, not who you truly are. When you start letting go of these masks, the need to please, the need to prove, the fear of being misunderstood, you begin to meet yourself on a deeper level. And that's not easy. It's uncomfortable to strip away layers you've worn for years. But underneath that discomfort lies clarity, the clarity that reminds you that you've never been lost. You've only been buried beneath what you thought you had to be. There's a phase in growth where you feel like you don't recognize yourself anymore. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. That in-between space feels confusing and lonely, like standing in the dark waiting for your new reflection to form. But that's the incubation stage of transformation. You're rebuilding your sense of self from the inside out, not based on old patterns but new awareness. And though it feels uncertain, it's the most honest place you'll ever stand. Because here, you're no longer performing, you're discovering. You're learning to exist without the crutches of familiarity, and that's how you begin to trust yourself again. When you let go of attachments that define you, you start to experience freedom in ways you never imagined. You stop needing approval because your sense of worth isn't dependent on others seeing your value. You stop fearing change because you understand that every transformation only brings you closer to your authentic self. You start living with intention instead of reaction. You stop explaining your choices to people who are only connected to a version of you that no longer exists. This freedom is quiet, steady, and unshakable. It's the kind of freedom that comes from being rooted in your truth, not floating in the opinions of others. You may look back on old versions of yourself and feel shame or regret, but those versions were necessary. They carried you when you didn't know better. They made choices that led you here. Don't dishonor them, thank them. Because without those stages of identity, you wouldn't have developed the strength to evolve. Every mistake, every attachment, every heartbreak, it all shaped the foundation of who you're becoming. The key is not to stay attached to those identities, but to integrate the lessons they gave you. That's how you grow with grace, by accepting your evolution instead of resisting it. Growth isn't about erasing your past. It's about outgrowing your limitations. Letting go of what defined you doesn't mean you're losing yourself. It means you're finally meeting yourself. The truth is, most people spend their lives trying to become something they already are, only to realize too late that they were whole all along. When you stop identifying with the temporary, you begin to connect with the timeless. You find peace in simply being, not in proving. You realize that your value isn't in how much you do, who you impress, or what you achieve. It's in the fact that you exist. You are enough, even when stripped of every label the world gave you. Because the truest version of you doesn't need decoration, it just needs recognition. So when life forces you to let go of roles, people, or dreams, don't see it as losing your identity. See it as refining it. Every ending is an initiation into deeper authenticity. Every release is an act of faith in who you are becoming, because the goal was never to stay the same. The goal was to become real. The version of you that's emerging after letting go will not need validation, attention, or permission. It will stand firm in truth, steady in peace, and fearless in self-worth. Because once you realize that your identity isn't tied to what you've lost, but to what remains unshaken within you, you finally understand that you were never losing yourself, you were simply finding your way home. When we lose something, a person, a dream, or a part of ourselves, the first instinct is to fill that void as quickly as possible. We reach for distractions, new connections, or new goals just to escape the silence that follows loss. The emptiness feels unbearable, so we try to drown it in noise, productivity, or validation. But the truth is, healing doesn't happen through replacement. It happens through stillness. It's in the quiet moments where there's no one to impress, no chaos to hide behind, and no expectations to meet, that you finally hear your own voice again. Stillness doesn't mean you stop moving forward. It means you stop running away. It's the pause between who you were and who you're becoming, the sacred space where healing begins to take root. We live in a world that glorifies busyness, where constant motion is seen as proof of strength. People say, keep going, as if pausing means you're weak. But sometimes stillness is the hardest thing you can do, because when you stop, you have to feel, you have to face the emotions you've buried beneath the noise, the grief, the disappointment, the loneliness. You have to admit that some things didn't go the way you hoped, and no amount of distraction can fix that. Yet this confrontation is not punishment, it's purification. In stillness, you don't lose control, you regain it. You realize that avoiding pain only prolongs it, while sitting with it transforms it. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the deep work that motion tries to avoid. Healing is not linear, and it's not fast. It's the slow process of peeling back layers of resistance, one realization at a time. Some days you'll feel peace, and the next, you'll feel like you're falling apart again. But that's how real healing works. It's cyclical, not constant. The moments of stillness aren't signs that you're stuck. They're moments when your soul is catching up with your body. We are so used to measuring progress by visible outcomes that we forget emotional growth doesn't always show. Sometimes progress looks like sitting in silence without reaching for your phone. Sometimes it's choosing to cry instead of pretending you're fine. These tiny, invisible acts of honesty are the foundations of true recovery. When you choose stillness, you learn to differentiate between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is emptiness that seeks filling, but solitude is fullness that seeks understanding. In solitude, you stop looking outward for comfort and start nurturing inward peace. You begin to reconnect with yourself in ways that external validation could never offer. You realize how much of your identity was built on noise, on being busy, being needed, being seen. Stillness strips all that away, leaving only what's real. At first, it's uncomfortable because you meet yourself without filters or distractions. But the more time you spend in solitude, the more you realize that silence isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. In stillness, the truth you've been avoiding rises to the surface. You start to see patterns, the ways you've settled, the habits you've justified, the pain you've normalized, and at first, that awareness hurts. It feels heavy, almost unbearable, because it exposes how long you've lived disconnected from yourself. But awareness is the beginning of change. You can't heal what you won't face. Stillness is where you finally stop numbing the wound and start cleaning it. It's where you understand that healing is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing not to carry it forward. Every moment you spend in stillness is an act of self-respect, a declaration that you're done running from your truth. The beauty of stillness is that it teaches you to separate your pain from your identity. When you're constantly moving, you become entangled with what hurt you, letting it define your worth. But when you sit still long enough, you start to observe your pain instead of becoming it. You realize that what happened to you doesn't determine who you are, it only shaped your perspective. This shift is powerful because it allows you to reclaim your narrative. You stop saying, "This broke me," and start saying, "This grew me." The distance you create through stillness isn't detachment, it's clarity. You finally see that your wounds were never your identity, they were your teachers. Stillness also reveals the difference between being healed and being distracted. Many people mistake distraction for progress because distraction feels better in the moment. You meet someone new, dive into a new project, or keep yourself too busy to think, and for a while, it works. You convince yourself you've moved on, but the moment everything quiets down, the pain resurfaces because it was never truly healed. True healing requires patience and presence. It requires facing what you don't want to feel until it no longer controls you. You can't outwork your emotions. You can only outgrow them by allowing them to move through you completely. And that only happens in stillness. When you stop filling every silence with something, you start discovering what your heart has been trying to tell you all along. Maybe it's the realization that you were forcing something that wasn't meant for you. Maybe it's the understanding that your worth isn't dependent on who stays or leaves. Or maybe it's simply remembering how to breathe without anxiety dictating every thought. These revelations don't come from outside advice, they come from listening to yourself deeply. Stillness gives you the space to reconnect with your intuition, to rebuild trust with your own voice. You stop needing answers from others because you start hearing your own. In stillness, you also learn that peace doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll never feel sadness, anger, or confusion again. Peace means accepting that emotions are part of the human experience and allowing them to exist without judgment. It's knowing that you can feel pain without becoming bitter, and that you can feel loss without losing yourself. Stillness doesn't erase the past, it reframes it. It helps you see the beauty in the breakdown, the growth in the grief, the lesson in the letting go. It reminds you that healing isn't about going back to who you were, it's about becoming someone wiser because of what you've endured. Eventually, the stillness that once felt unbearable becomes your sanctuary. The same silence that once reminded you of loss begins to feel like safety. You start craving it because it's where you find balance, direction, and clarity. You no longer need constant distraction to feel alive because you've learned to find fulfillment within. The world around you doesn't have to slow down for you to feel at peace because peace now lives inside you. That's the reward of stillness, the unshakable calm that no chaos can touch, the quiet confidence that no loss can take, and the deep knowing that you never needed to replace what you lost, you just needed to return to yourself. People will often misunderstand detachment. They'll say you've become cold, distant, or unfeeling, but what they don't see is that detachment is not a lack of love, it's the highest form of it. It's loving with boundaries, caring without losing yourself, and choosing peace over chaos. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. It's learning to let people, outcomes, and emotions exist without needing to control them. You start realizing that not everything deserves a reaction, not every battle requires your energy, and not every connection needs to be fought for. It's a quiet kind of strength, one that doesn't scream or demand, but simply stands tall in peace. Because when you master detachment, you don't stop feeling, you start feeling deeply without being destroyed by what you feel. True detachment is born from self-respect. When you've been drained enough times, betrayed enough times, or disappointed enough times, you learn that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. You start setting boundaries not to punish others, but to honor yourself. You realize that constantly giving, fixing, and proving your worth only leads to exhaustion. Detachment is the shift from "I'll do anything to be understood" to "I'm at peace even if I'm misunderstood." It's no longer about proving your intentions, it's about maintaining your integrity. You stop chasing explanations or closure from those who refuse to see your value. The moment you understand that silence speaks louder than reaction, you stop engaging with things that cost you your calm. There's a false narrative that detachment means disconnection, that if you're detached, you don't care. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Detachment is presence without dependency. It's the ability to be fully involved without being emotionally enslaved. You can love someone deeply and still recognize when it's time to step back. You can be committed to your goals without being consumed by them. Detachment gives you perspective. It reminds you that you are not your emotions. You are the observer of them. You begin to understand that everything is temporary: pain, success, love, and loss. And instead of fearing that truth, you start to appreciate it, because what's temporary teaches you gratitude, what's detached teaches you peace. When you live without detachment, you hand over your power to everything outside of you. You become reactive to other people's moods, controlled by their opinions, and addicted to their validation. Your happiness becomes conditional, dependent on how the world treats you instead of how you treat yourself. But when you cultivate detachment, you reclaim that power. You learn that emotional stability is an inside job. You stop letting every little thing shake you. You develop a calm confidence, a quiet knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way. You no longer need to chase control because you trust your ability to adapt. That's the essence of detachment: not closing your heart, but anchoring it so deeply that no external storm can uproot it. Detachment also redefines how you experience love. You stop equating love with attachment, possession, or dependency. You begin to love people for who they are, not for what they give you. You stop trying to change them or hold onto them out of fear. You allow them to be free, even if that freedom means they walk away. That kind of love is liberating for both you and them, because love without control is the only kind that can truly last. When you love from a place of detachment, you stop asking, "How long will this stay?" and start appreciating, "What is this teaching me?" That shift from ownership to appreciation transforms not just your relationships, but your capacity for compassion and peace. There's a deep peace that comes when you stop over-identifying with your emotions. You still feel everything: the joy, the pain, the disappointment, but you stop drowning in it. You observe your feelings like waves. They come, they go, and none of them define you. This awareness gives you freedom. You no longer spiral over temporary setbacks because you trust that emotions, like tides, always change. Detachment teaches you emotional intelligence, the ability to stay centered when life pulls you in every direction. You don't suppress your feelings, you simply refuse to be ruled by them. That's how detachment becomes not just a mindset, but a way of living with calm clarity in an unpredictable world. Practicing detachment also means learning to let go of control, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that control is an illusion. You can influence, guide, and give your best effort, but the outcome is never entirely yours. And when you accept that, life becomes lighter. You stop fighting the current and start flowing with it. You trust timing more. You trust that what's meant for you will never require endless struggle or self-betrayal to keep. The moment you stop forcing outcomes, you allow better ones to unfold naturally. Detachment doesn't make you passive, it makes you wise. It's the discipline to stay grounded even when everything around you feels uncertain. In a world that glorifies attachment to success, validation, and constant connection, choosing detachment is revolutionary. It's refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. It's saying, "I can love you and still choose myself." It's saying, "I can care deeply and still walk away in peace." Detachment allows you to operate from strength instead of need. It's what keeps your spirit intact when life tests you. It's what reminds you that you are whole, even without the things or people you once thought you couldn't live without. And that wholeness is what attracts better energy, better opportunities, and better love. Because when you stop clinging, you start attracting. Detachment also brings clarity to your purpose. When you're not desperate for results, your work becomes more powerful. You stop chasing outcomes and start focusing on mastery. You give without expecting, you serve without seeking applause. That's when your efforts align with something bigger than yourself. You begin to understand that peace isn't found at the finish line, it's found in the way you walk the path. Detachment teaches you that purpose is not about achievement, it's about alignment. When you act from peace instead of pressure, everything you touch becomes more authentic, more meaningful, and more fulfilling. You stop rushing life and start living it. In the end, detachment is not about building walls, it's about building wisdom. It's the art of caring deeply without losing balance, of being passionate without becoming desperate, of loving freely without fearing loss. Detachment is what transforms suffering into understanding, chaos into calm, and endings into evolution. It teaches you that not everything needs to be held onto, and not everything lost is a tragedy. You begin to see that peace isn't something you find, it's something you protect. And the more you honor that truth, the stronger you become. Because the greatest act of love is not attachment, it's the courage to let go when holding on means losing yourself.